And at number 10, Captain America. In Uncanny X-Men from 2013 Volume 3 Issue 3, Cyclops takes on Captain America. At the time, Cyclops and his team of X-Men are seen as either visionary revolutionaries or dangerous terrorists. Captain America attempts to arrest Cyclops for Charles Xavier's death, more on that later, and the two duke it out, sort of, with Cyclops leading a group of X-Men and Cap leading the Avengers. Cyclops entices Cap to attack and ultimately wins this little standoff thanks to another mutant, a younger mutant by the name of Ava Bell, under his command. She creates a time bubble of sorts, freezing the Avengers before they can even lay a finger on the X-Men. Cyclops then gives a whole speech that's captured on video about how the Avengers won't fight for the rights of mutants and won't let mutants fight for their own rights either, before teleporting away to safety. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like, yeah, Cyclops came out on top there. Sorry, Cap. And at number 9, Young Cyclops. Cyclops versus Young Cyclops. This was a thing that happened in all new X-Men Volume 1 Issue 4. Sort of. The two never engage in a one-on-one battle, but let's backtrack for a second here. In 2013 in All New X-Men, the original group of X-Men from the past were brought to the future by Beast. Upon arriving, tensions were high as the young X-Men learnt their fates. Now at this point, Cyclops had killed Professor Xavier, like I said, more on that later, and young Cyclops is pretty darn tormented by what his future self would become. Fair enough. Upon first meeting him, the past version of Jean Grey lost control of her powers after reading present-day Cyclops' mind. Present Jean Grey, might I add, was dead at the time, by the way. She loses control and knocks off present-day Cyclops' visor, causing young past Cyclops to have to retaliate. He was overwhelmed by how much stronger present-day Cyclops' optic blasts were. Also, you could very much argue that young Cyclops lost to older Cyclops on an emotional level, considering that young Jean Grey essentially broke up with him when she found out what he was capable of doing in the future. And that just sucks. Speaking of young Cyclops though, that brings us to our next number. And at number 8, the Inhumans. During the Inhumans vs X-Men story arc, young Cyclops manages to kick some Inhuman butt. He was one of the many mutants who teamed up to take on the Inhumans after it was revealed that the final Terrigen cloud was close to being assimilated into Earth's atmosphere, which would inevitably make life inhabitable for mutants on Earth. But during the storyline, his body was possessed by Mosaic and he became aware of Emma Frost meddling with older Scott Summers. Once he's seen this, he confronts her and learns the truth. Present-day Cyclops had died of Mpox and Frost had just used a mental projection of him to wage war, with his death being caused by Black Bolt and spawning a lot of the conflict. This aided in resolving some of the Inhuman and mutant conflict, with Medusa destroying the Terrigen cloud after all.
Number 7, Bolt. Bolt pops up as Chris Bradley in the film Wolverine X-Men Origins. His character ends up suspected dead following a run-in with Victor Creed in the film. His powers were then harvested and used to help build the film's terrifying, in so many ways, version of Deadpool, aka Weapon 11. This version of Deadpool also later gets taken out by both Wolverine and Creed when the two half-brothers, in this story, that story they were half-brothers, team up to defeat him, with Victor distracting Wade just long enough for Logan to come in and decapitate him. Although of course he wasn't dead.
And at number 6, Magneto. Okay, so these days Magneto is technically a superhero after the events of House of X, and quite frankly, Cyclops hasn't fought a whole lot of superheroes in one, so the Master of Magnetism lands a spot on our list. Cyclops and the rest of the X-Men have come face to face with Magneto more times than we can count, and while Cyclops has never personally won against Magneto, you know, team efforts matter.
Number 5, Mystique. While Mystique might not be strong in the traditional sense, she is a very powerful mutant. Her shape-shifting abilities allow her to pull off all kinds of tricks, both in and out of combat, and she is insanely wily as a result. Wolverine was sent to track Mystique down and take her out by Cyclops. In issue 65 of Wolverine Volume 3, we see these two have a final showdown in the desert. Mystique actually manages to put up a pretty good fight in this comic, using guns and grenades to hold Wolverine at bay, but eventually she succumbs to too many stab wounds during their fight. Wolverine of course just eventually heals himself. Despite defeating her and leaving Mystique weak enough that it would be possible for Wolverine to just take Raven out right there, he chooses to leave her bleeding out in the desert with a loaded gun, claiming that she knows what it's for. Ooh, that is dark. He's like, I'm not like you can use this gun. And I'm like, Wolverine, you kill people all the time, dude. What you talking about? You got some similarities there, I think.
Up next, number 4, the X-Men again. Okay, so this is yet another great example of how Scott is a master tactician. In Uncanny X-Men issue 175, the X-Men believe that Scott is the Dark Phoenix, and they decide they need to take him out. Cyclops thinks quick on his feet, manages to use his knowledge of his allies with a combination of countering and melee attacks to bring them all down, and then makes it out of the skirmish for the better. He manages to zap Wolverine with his optic blast, all while using some judo to knock over Cyclops, Rogue, and Storm in one hit. He then predicts each of their moves based off of their battle styles. It's definitely impressive to say the least.
Number 3. Gambit. In Uncanny X-Men, it is revealed that Gambit was actually part of the plot to take out the Morlocks during the events of the Mutant Massacre, but was forced to do so because of a pact with Mr. Sinister. In the end, Gambit actually refuses to take part in the massacre after helping the Marauders to get to the Morlocks' hideout. It's Sabretooth who reprimands him for being unable to follow through, apparently beating Gambit until he was on the brink of death, which we find out in issue 350 during a flashback seen through the eyes of Rogue, who had just kissed Gambit. So, you know, she's like having his memories and she's like, oh my goodness. Gambit only managed to save a young Marrow as well as just barely saving himself.
And at number 2, Wolverine again. Yup, it is one of those lists, friends. And really, some of Scott's most iconic battles against other superheroes are against Logan, so we had to include more than one on our list. This one is significantly more recent, occurring during the Schism story arc, in issue 4 and 5. Cyclops had become a bit of a tyrant in the way that he led his X-Men, putting young mutants in danger, and like many a time before, Wolverine had objections to his methods. Although, arguably Wolverine was kind of in the right here. After Scott taunts Logan about Jean Grey, saying that she never loved him and she was always frightened of him, and Logan fires back with a, and if she were here right now, who do you think she'd be more frightened of? They go at it. The two end up having a brutal brawl, with Cyclops enduring multiple massive wounds from Logan's claws. While the brawl itself doesn't have a clear winner, it was interrupted by a Sentinel attack, Cyclops forces Wolverine out of Utopia, with the latter recruiting his own X-Men team in the aftermath. So I mean, hey, Cyclops held his ground. And finally, the one you've all been waiting for. In at 1, Charles Xavier. Perhaps the most iconic superhero Cyclops has defeated is his own mentor, Charles Xavier. And not just defeated, he killed him. Having been possessed by the Phoenix Force when it returned to Earth, a power-mad Cyclops came face to face with his mentor, the latter attempting to put an end to his mentee's reign of terror. Xavier tried to convince Scott to turn away from the Phoenix Force, but failed, with Scott embracing it fully and inevitably killing Charles. Upon doing so, he became the Dark Phoenix in one of the biggest cliffhangers in recent X-Men history. Xavier's death would lead into Avengers vs. X-Men and only led to further troubles for Scott.
Number 10. Silver Samurai. The Silver Samurai and Wolverine have an epic fight with one another in Uncanny X-Men issue 173. Kenichio Harada and Logan have a ton of history, and despite fighting one another a bunch, the two also share a mutual respect for one another. Their fight lasts 3 honestly beautiful pages. Despite Silver Samurai's ability to charge his sword using tachyon energy, making it strong enough to cut through almost anything, his sword remains no match for Wolverine's adamantium claws. Logan ends up victorious after he breaks Harada's arm, forcing the Silver Samurai to be at his mercy. In fact, he would have been killed if not for the interference of Mariko, the Silver Samurai's half-sister, and later, Viper. Number 9. The Mongrels. While we may have talked about Wolverine's famous son, Daken, on the first part of this list, we have yet to highlight how brutally Wolverine beat 5 of his other kids, who were actually originally rounded up by Daken himself. Initially. The Mongrels consist of Sophist, Shadowstalker, Cannonfoot, Fire Knives, and are led by Gunhawk. Wow, those are some names. Cannonfoot is the only one that is actually confirmed a mutant, but I feel like we simply didn't get enough time with the other members of the Mongrels to really learn what their mutant powers were, but I'm sure they had them. One can assume their power sets would at least be somewhat similar to Logan's, had we actually gotten into that. Of course, pitting the Mongrels against their father was all part of a master plan to get back at Wolverine and basically torture him. In fact, they were expected to die. A plan that was executed and orchestrated by Daken and likely the right hand. Logan killed the group of mutants without knowing that they were actually his own children, and I don't think we really even knew if they knew that he was their dad. Wolverine finds out after his connection to the Mongrels, and despite the fact that they were the ones who attacked him, Wolverine ends up feeling pretty guilty about it. Number 8. NORTHSTAR. When Wolverine found himself being brainwashed and basically mind controlled by the Hand, he was sent on a mission to prove himself by eliminating Kitty Pryde. While attempting to pounce on her, claws drawn, Kitty phased, causing Logan to go through her, and his claws thereby to go through the mutant behind her, NORTHSTAR. Ouch, poor Jean-Paul. He got beaten just being a bystander. He wasn't even a target in this one. You know it's impressive when Logan can take out a pretty powerful mutant just by accidentally taking them out.
And at 7, Alpha Fight. Okay, slightly untraditional choice for this number, but once upon a time, in an alternate universe, Scott Summers found himself fighting against the Alpha Fight team. Except they were all zombies. As you can guess, this happened in Marvel's Zombies, the alternate timeline in which a zombie virus proceeds to infect the entire globe and all of the heroes and villains within it. In Marvel's Zombies Dead Days, Cyclops alongside the other X-Men take on a zombified version of Alpha Fight at the X-Mansion. Despite beating them, he too succumbs to the infection eventually and becomes a zombie himself, later being a meal for the cosmic zombie Galacti, a group of Marvel zombie characters who managed to eat Galactus and therefore inherited the power cosmic. It's a whole thing.
Number 6, the Vaporizer. In the Ultimate Universe, Wolverine was sent to take out a nameless teenage mutant who has the power to vaporize any living tissue in his vicinity in issue number 41 of Ultimate X-Men. This mutant's powers were so powerful and uncontrollable that the boy found himself vaporizing a whole town of people without even completely realizing that he was doing it. He killed over 250 people by accident. Wolverine finds him hiding in a cave and has a talk with him about the risk that he poses to both humans and mutants alike. This mutant doesn't just lose to Wolverine, he surrenders. Despite how powerful the young boy was, this non-battle proved that sometimes all one needs to defeat an enemy is a 6-pack of beer and a brutally honest conversation. Number 5, John Wraith. John Wraith was killed by Victor in the film Wolverine X-Men Origins, where he is played by Will.I.Am. I don't know if you forgot about that, but that's a little fact for you. In the film, Victor snaps his spine, mining his DNA for Stryker to use, and in the comics, he met his end through another animalistic foe, HELLFIRE, the demonic possessed and soulless version of Wolverine who roams the earth wreaking havoc while Wolverine is busy in hell. In both universes though, John Wraith is known as a powerful teleporter, which makes it impressive that Victor Creed managed to defeat him in Wolverine's Origins by anticipating where Wraith would teleport to and moving faster than John himself could actually teleport. I mean, if you grab someone's spine, they can't really teleport away from that. But you gotta be fast. Number 4, the HELLFIRE Club. The HELLFIRE Club is basically one of the big bads of the X-Men world. They are an organization of criminal and mutant masterminds who aim to weigh the scales in the mutants' favor when it comes to world domination. That's right, they want to take over the world like most mutant bad guys do. They also dress like they're from Victorian England because, well, I guess they can. But despite their appearances, they still have some fairly strong members and a bunch of minions loyal to them. So don't think that just because they look ridiculous in their Victorian England dress that they are ridiculous, because they're not. But despite having an army of loyal members, this wasn't enough to stop Wolverine. In Uncanny X-Men issue 133, Wolverine takes down their entire brigade, all on his own, in an attempt to save the rest of the X-Men, who found themselves captured by them. Embarrassingly for Cyclops, while Wolverine takes on pretty much the entire HELLFIRE Club's army of minions, Scott struggles to take on Mastermind by himself in a fight on the astral plane. Wow. Keep up here, bub.
Moving on to number 3, Wolverine. Cyclops and Wolverine. Whether it's over ideologies or concerning their affections for Jean Grey, these two, despite recent times, just don't get along. Anyway, the rivalry between Scott and Logan became physical, as it often does, when the two duked it out, actually unintentionally in this case. During a battle against the pterodactyl villain Sauron, not to be confused with the Sauron of Lord of the Rings fame, Wolverine found himself falling victim to Sauron's mind control. And what does he do? Well, he sees his teammates as enemies and he attacks them. But you bet your butt that he goes for Scott first, and Slim has no issue attacking back. Between optic blasts and flailing claws, it's one of the more colorful duels that the two have had, and Wolverine was not the one to come out on top. And you know how I mentioned that recent times thing earlier? Well, it was briefly theorized that Wolverine, Jean Grey, and Cyclops, based on their bedroom design in House of X, may actually be a throuple now. How scandalous.
Number 2, Gorgon. These two faced off in Wolverine Volume 3, Issue 31 during the Enemy of the State story arc. Gorgon is known for being a fearsome villain who can, as his codename implies, turn enemies to stone with one simple glance. In fact, Gorgon has actually successfully killed Wolverine before. That's just how even of a match he and Wolverine are. He then had Wolverine resurrected and brainwashed him so that he might use him as his own assassin, turning him against his friends and colleagues in the hero community. In the end though, Wolverine got him back, and he got him back good. During their fight in issue 31, Wolverine seems to take a page out of Perseus's book. He defeats Gorgon using his own claws to reflect his own gaze back unto himself, turning Gorgon into stone before shattering him into a million pieces. Number 1, X-24. We gotta occasionally go cinematic when talking about Wolverine, and though we've already talked about Wolverine versus Wolverine on the part 1 of this list, that was an alternate version of Wolverine himself in the comics, and this is a clone, younger, more durable version of him from the same universe in the film Logan. Geez, I love this film. If you have time to rewatch this film, go do it, it's so good. Wolverine takes on X-24 more than once in the film, and although he has help in defeating him, regardless, it's still a fight worth mentioning, as X-24 was stated by Hugh Jackman to be like Wolverine, but in a permanent berserker rage, which is terrifying. That's like an unstoppable version of Wolverine, but he stopped it. It's also impressive to see an old and rundown Logan even manage to take on X-24, even with the assistance of Laura, aka X-23, and her friends. And sure, Logan himself died in the end, but really only at the cost of helping to actually take out X-24. Number 10, Caliban. During the Mutant Massacre, Sabretooth may have not been with the Marauders, massacring as many Morlocks as possible, but he shows up in X-Factor in a different part of the tunnels going after Caliban. The X-Men show up and think that they've disabled him, running to help the Morlocks from being brutally slaughtered. But Sabretooth was only pretending to be KO'd. He comes to and proceeds to continue to go after and threaten Caliban. Number 9, Deadpool. This fight happened in the 2016 run of Deadpool issue number 9. These two end up fighting because Wade thinks that Victor was actually responsible for killing his parents, even though he himself was the one responsible for killing his parents. He was sent to kill them to test his loyalty after his mind had been wiped so much he didn't really remember they were his parents. He set their house on fire. It's a really sad issue. Anyways, with both characters having strong regenerative healing factors, it could have been anyone's fight. But in the end, Sabretooth pushes Deadpool out into the road where he is hit by a car, and he decides to give up on the fight, urging the family in the car to just keep driving with him on the hood. And yeah, I know, Deadpool is a mutate, but I'm bumping him up to an honorary mutant just for the purpose of this list. Also, for someone who is so badass, Wade loses like a lot of fights, even within his own series. So like 50%, maybe not 50%, but at least 40% of the fights in his series, he's losing. Number 8, Morlocks. So later on, we find out that Sabretooth actually may have been involved in the Mutant Massacre more than we otherwise thought. Flashbacks later on in the comics reveal that Sabretooth was there during the bloodshed, happily tearing unnamed Morlocks to shreds. Yeesh. And sure, like Caliban, most Morlocks may not be known for their strength, but there is power in numbers. The Marauders were a handful of mutants who ended up being capable of obliterating hundreds and hundreds of Morlock mutants in the tunnels. And Sabretooth apparently had some more direct involvement than we originally knew when it came to this genocidal attack. So maybe he was there, maybe he wasn't. Depends on which issue you've read as to what they've dived into at the Mutant Massacre. It's kind of retconned as being more, I think, there for it later. Number 7, John Howlett Jr. John is Wolverine's brother in an alternate universe and comes from the series Wolverine: The End, which takes place on Earth 4011. His power set is similar to his brother James Howlett and includes a regenerative healing factor. He is known by the aliases Kitsunebi, White Ghost, and X. Wolverine was forced to fight John when it was revealed that he had a plot to take over Las Vegas. Both were relatively old at this point, and following an electric explosion during a fight, Wolverine accidentally stabbed John through the chest, fatally wounding him. John's healing factor was too slow and worn down at this point to allow him to regenerate his organs in time. John forgave Wolverine as he lay dying and confessed that he was glad that it had ended this way, and he was actually really proud of his brother. Aww. Sad. I love when people are in the middle of a fight and then they reconcile everything like as they're dying. This all could have been resolved if you had a conversation about how much you loved each other. Number 6, Mentallo. Back when Sabretooth was a good guy and was a leader of the rebranded X-Force team known as Weapon X at the time, he and his team ended up taking on Mentallo. Unfortunately for them, it looked like Mentallo would actually win this fight and end up being successful in bringing back Stryker, who the team was aiming to kind of keep dead. Seeing there was no other way, Victor sacrificed himself, giving in to his baser animal instincts and losing his mind and moral compass in a berserker rage. Mentallo was caught off guard and forced to kill Victor, but this opened him up to attack from other members of the team, which ultimately led to his downfall. So although Victor did not deal the fatal blow in this fight, without his actions, MENTALLO would definitely have not been defeated. So I'm going to count this as a victory for him. Also, it's his team, so I think we gotta give him some credit.
Moving on, in at number 5, the X-Men. Because of recent times, sometimes we can forget that Cyclops used to be a total stand-up guy, with his team's best interest at heart. Case in point, the Uncanny X-Men issue 127, after the X-Men were left shaken by a conflict with the mutant Proteus. Cyclops decided that he needed to boost their confidence. Enter some serious tough love, where Cyclops proceeded to beat all of his teammates up in a skirmish. A good leader knows how to keep their team sharp, people. Scott riled up several of the X-Men, engaging them in a friendly fight of sorts, well, they thought it was a real fight, in order to help them get their act back together. At the time, they totally thought he had turned against them. He kicked Nightcrawler's butt, criticizing him for pulling a teleporting stunt that left him wide open to attacks. He taunted Logan, splashing a drink in his face, and then dodged the mutant. And then he messed with Storm, who has a history of actually kicking Scott's butt. He misdirected her and then caught her off guard with his optic blasts. By the end of the skirmish, he revealed to them why he had lured them into battle, and even learned Logan's respect briefly in the process.
Number 4, Angel. In the Ultimate Universe, Sabretooth brutally kills Angel. He cracks his skull open. Yeah. Those poor, oh so poor hollow bones. And he also smashes his face later on the ground after leaping on top of him in the Ultimatum storyline. Sabretooth then goes on to brutally brag about taking out an angel, and says he'll likely go to hell for this. I mean, he'll likely go to hell for a lot of things, I think, at that point. He even goes so far to tear off one of Angel's wings as he's bleeding out. Fortunately, Hawkeye manages to get some revenge for the fallen hero, shooting Sabretooth right in the eye with an arrow in Ultimatum number 4. Of course, Sabretooth is just like, ow, because he can kind of regenerate, but, you know, still, something. Number 3, Cyclops. I know what you're thinking, so wait a minute, Amanda, doesn't Cyclops usually beat Wolverine? Well, you're right, he usually does beat Wolverine. However, there have been a few occasions where Wolverine has come out on top. One, in the 90s animated cartoon, there is a scene where Wolverine fights Cyclops, except it isn't really Cyclops, it ends up just being a robot, as Cyclops at the time is getting married to Jean Grey. However, Wolverine does best this simulation of Cyclops, which is pretty impressive, even though it's just a simulation. And number 2, there is a time when Wolverine comes very, very close to basically killing Cyclops, in my opinion, and that would be in X-Men Schism. At the end of X-Men Schism number 4, we actually see that Wolverine is just about to finish off Cyclops, claws drawn, about to smash him right in the face with those claws. We pick up on X-Men Schism number 5, and the two continue to fight. It seems that Cyclops is basically blasting Wolverine down to bones, but the cool thing about this is that Wolverine is still intact. Although he doesn't have a lot of flesh on him, he's still actually able to fight Scott. And he actually probably would have finished them if it wasn't for Hope coming in and defending them from the Sentinel that's about to basically, well, kill both of them at that point. Still, if they'd continued, I'm telling you, those claws would have gone right into Cyclops' eyes, right into his head, and he'd be dead. Number 2, PSYLOKKE. When you usually think of strong villains, you tend to think that their weakness normally lies within the realm of psionic heroes or mutants. But with Sabretooth, although Jean has handily disabled him in an instant, he isn't completely helpless when it comes to those with psionic abilities. When he finds his way into the X-Mansion in issue 213 of Uncanny X-Men, one of the mutants that he runs into is PSYLOKKE, and while he doesn't full-on defeat her as Storm and Wolverine come to her rescue, Sabretooth gets pretty close to ripping her throat out. Apparently his psychic defenses are strong enough to block her psi bolts, and she is only able to probe his mind while he's distracted by fighting Wolverine. Also, for some reason, a lot of people count this as a victory for PSYLOKKE, but without her fellow X-Men coming to her defense, I don't see how she actually would be able to take Sabretooth alone. So I don't know why we consider that a win for her. Number 1, Wolverine. Yeah, you guessed it, you knew he was going to be on here. Sabretooth has brutally beaten Wolverine on numerous occasions. He literally does it every year on Wolverine's birthday. Wolverine himself has even suggested in his own comic book commentary bubbles that he believes Victor is actually more powerful than him. The difference between these two characters is where Victor seems to hold the upper hand a lot of the times. Sabretooth as a villain often has no problem with kicking a man when he's down. He's sadistic and gives into the cruelty of his animal nature. Wolverine sometimes fights to hold back giving into his berserker rage, whereas Sabretooth's berserker rage seems to be kind of a permanent state of being for him. In the end, it's often Victor's bloodlust and ruthlessness that leave him coming out on top. At least when the two of those guys are fighting. Against other people, not always.